Welcome back to the Torque Test channel. We've been testing combination wrenches, specifically the more prone to slipping and busting your knuckles side, the open end, because you certainly wouldn't prefer to use that end, but often are forced to in a set amount of space in an engine bay. For us so far, specialty jaw designs, fancy ones with cuts and grooves in them, have made a positive difference. But is that because we've so far only included the priciest options like Snap-on, Matco, and Wright tools? Today we include the most requested brands from the comments section to find out, especially to see if Milwaukee and Harbor Freight's icons stack up to brands like Snap-on. If there is a US brand you see missing from today, it may just be in our next and final episode on these, in which we'll be also including options from all over Europe. And if you haven't already seen, Project Farm has since come out with testing on combination wrenches, including some of the brands from your guys' lists, so be sure to check out some great testing over there as well, leaving a link below. Plenty to look at, so let's dive in using our usual process you can review from past episodes. All the hardware, bolts, washers, nuts get replaced for each test. We do 3 tests per wrench, and the median test is shown on screen. Our first wrench up is Pittsburgh from Harbor Freight. Last time, I incorrectly thought that the Olympia we were testing was the cheapest wrench on the market, but actually these Harbor Freight Pittsburgh options, which are also made in India, cost just $179 a piece. You can always rely on the store for offering the most affordable options of most tools, sometimes for better or worse. This wrench, like some of the other hardware store options you guys have requested, is not a specialty jaw design, but should make for some good comparisons when we're looking at those. By zeroing out the calipers, we can measure the additional clearance this wrench has over a matching bolt size, and this one sees 0.29 millimeters over, which is already a record for us, the worst we've seen. Let's see how it turns a fastener though. The Pittsburgh from Harbor Freight is not helped by its wide bolt clearance and thinner than most 6.2mm wrench thickness, and climbs slowly to 940 psi before slipping. That thin wrench can be a benefit though, so it may get some reward here as a factor of that thickness and performance once we compare it versus the others. Let's skip from the cheapest to the most expensive wrench on the day, Metrinch, which is priced at $11.42 a piece. This specialty non-slip jaw design is a as seen on TV sort of item made popular by decades now of TV commercials and product placements on programs. A wrench design that's supposed to not only work on SAE and metric, saving you a purchase there, but also on some of the most rounded, ugly looking bolts you can find. So we ordered our usual 16mm to match our testing setup nut size and got this 19mm from Metrinch. Then we proceeded to call, email, wait on hold, and leaving voicemails for 2 weeks without so much as hearing from a person. I'm guessing this is basically a shadow company at this point, just shipping logistics. Lights on, but no one's home, so good luck with your warranty. But our viewers are cooler than any brand by our measure, and a viewer by the name of Joey sent us his 16mm Metrinch. Let's see how it does. At its slimmest, it measures 0.16 millimeters over, if you can even measure these odd-looking jaws that way. On a bolt and nut, though, it really does sort of cam into position, then bite with those protruding lobes. And bite is the word for it, as if it does ever slip, it's going to take a pound of flesh with it. The Metrinch skyrockets up to 1463 psi before it slips, looking like Moses parting the sea with what it leaves behind, but at 7mm, which is on the slim side, both the numbers it puts up here are impressive. This 209 here being the highest so far, just above Snap-on's Flink Drive Plus, which was 204.4, which we'll be ranking it with soon. You better not need to warranty one of these or contact Metrinch for really anything, but it does grip. Now for some hardware store brands you've suggested. By price, Husky is up first, $297 a wrench from Home Depot, and measures 0.19 millimeters over, which is not bad. The Husky is one of those wrenches that feels solid, and you're going about your business, then all of a sudden it doesn't. In its median test, making as much as 1168 here, which isn't terrible, though it was also consistent, its low score test here being 1153. Next up, found in a hardware store, is DeWALT. This one found in their DWM T73810 set. Only available in these sort of long pattern-like designs. Most of our viewers who suggested these did so because they felt they are not the greatest, and especially compared to Milwaukee, so let's take a closer look. Its clearance measures not very good. Its length allows you to perform this sort of thing a bit easy, and that's round over at 1028 in its median test. Our graph here shows a high of 1067, which will correct that. That's from its highest test. Altogether, not all that great, or perhaps as advertised according to our viewers. Next up in price is Kobalt from Lowe's now. Kobalt is always performed sort of wellish or middle of the pack on our channel, and its 0.18 millimeter clearance is not bad. Unlike the Husky, which is made in China, this Kobalt is from Taiwan, which is why perhaps it's giving very Tekton-like vibes in person, in use right now, and it climbs to 1060, or enough for second place. Now, last up in our cluster of moderately priced hardware store options, and most expensive among them, is Urrea, a made-in-Mexico brand wrench sold predominantly on HomeDepot.com, and let's address the elephant in the room. It sounds like the stuff that's in P. There's no getting around that. $477 a wrench though, and that could be because of this specialty jaw design, which with this sort of dimple notch they say is good for 3 points of contact on a nut rather than the traditional wrench of 2. One thing's for sure though, this wrench gets the worst clearance measurement we've seen, about 0.38 millimeter over. It's closer to being a 16.5 millimeter wrench than a 16 millimeter wrench. Now, according to this math for a go, no-go gauge, which would top out at 16.28 millimeters or so, this wrench wouldn't pass a simple no-go gauge inspection. Oh, and we got this info from Urrea themselves, so they do know what this standard is sort of about. But we have seen specialty jaws do some serious underdog work, but not in this wrench's case. The Urrea wrench makes it up to 998 before it slipped, which is above the Pittsburgh, but it's also an 8.4 millimeter thick wrench. Quite chunky. Its 118 score here as a function of that jaw thickness and performance tells the story. That's as bad as we've ever seen, worse than the Amazon Denali set that's usually holding those types of records right now. Now, we've covered this with the V-jaw of the Sunex wrench design before, but these recesses, this third type jaw design, whatever flavor they come in, they just don't really stand up to practical physics. These opposing sides make sense, like on a regular wrench. One side is in compression, the other is in tension. There's nothing on the other side of this third one, unless it were a flare nut wrench design. There's nothing really stopping the nut from just being pushed out once it sees any force from here. This 3D drawing would only really make sense if both the wrench and the nut were fixed bodies. In Fusion 360, they really need to unanchor this wrench so that it can move. This is what happens for us. Check this out sort of frame by frame. The wrench's dimple jaw, once it sees compression, just pushes the nut away. And why wouldn't it? There's nothing on the opposing end to stop it. Now, of course, I'm being a bit pedantic here. I apologize. It just frustrates me when some people are operating under the assumption that brands like Snap-on or Has-It haven't figured out this missing source of 50% more jaw-gripping action just being left on the table. I mean, it's like they don't even... Milwaukee. Now, if you like specialty jaws, hold on to your butts or your wallet because this design has it all. The V-groove at the base that we contend maybe does nothing. Radius corners, that's cool, sort of makes sense. Grooves and slats deeper than anything we've tested on the bottom, on the top. Different numbers on the bottom and the top as well. Oh yeah, and this one's not a Milwaukee. This is actually a Carlyle from Napa Auto Parts, which actually predates the Milwaukee. Here we go. Now look at those two similar designs here, and oh, this one's actually a Harbor Freight Icon. These three wrenches used from what we can measure and tell to be exactly the same specialty jaw design. Somewhere, some guy in Taiwan, likely in the south in Taichung where wrenches are made, is getting rich off of this design being made from 3+ brands churning out these every day. Or they're just coming from the same factory maybe? We thought so at first, though the Icon and Carlyle in particular, while looking very close, their body thickness, jaw thickness, and wrench weight is very different. The Carlyle is lighter, the later introduced Icon is heavier and thicker, and the Milwaukee, which is shorter than both of those, weighs somehow even a bit more than all of them being thickest overall. All certainly employ the same everything but the kitchen sink non-slip design, but definitely 3 different sets of tooling and forging dies going on here. Their bolt clearances speak to that as well. 0.17 millimeters clearance for the Milwaukee up first. All these wrenches cost quite a bit. This Milwaukee going for $866 a piece, which is usually tied with the Harbor Freight Icon. As we've seen with jaws that have these cuts and grooves in them before, it can make a difference though, and the Milwaukee piles up the PSI up to 1492 for first place. But not without cost.
These top ones are not from maxing it out. This is at like 1300 PSI. This is it slipping. So definitely leave some marks.
Icon is up next, and with a tighter clearance at 0.11 millimeters over, which ties it for the best we've seen. Among all these three wrenches, as you saw, they can and do, when working on the upper half of their limit, leave their mark, so you have to weigh that importance for yourself. But this Icon, while being a thinner jaw, is impressive. 1495 PSI, just barely squeaking out into first place from that Milwaukee. And the Carlyle is our final wrench on the day, and it's also a tight fit, 0.12 millimeters over, and while thinnest and the oldest design from the trio, also does super well, I suppose, unsurprisingly at this point with this design. 1465, all three just short of maxing out the threads on these coupling nuts. Now if we're talking just pure beans, raw gripping power, the bit thicker but still tight tolerance Icon did best overall, in our opinion, managing to max out the coupling nut in one of its tests, 1542 PSI, while none of the others were able to in their three tests. But when looking at median results, just median so far, let's take a look at the leaderboard. All three of these wrenches with the same jaw design, perhaps unsurprisingly, performed similarly. The wider jaw having a looser fit probably helped to guarantee that. This is how the ranking points work out then, with the Pittsburgh getting bottom honors, although priced accordingly. The middle of the pack options getting sort of middle of the pack points, with the Kobalt doing quite good across here, and all of these getting 9s for performance being about the same. Specialty jaws yet again making a difference if you're willing to possibly replace a bolt and nut here and there with some love marks on it after removing. The Metrinch, though, with the thinnest jaws, was able to make this level of bolt tension. It gets a 10 with top honors across everything we've tested, a borderline 11 or basically us having to resort this list, but the Carlyle was close enough to earn also a 10 out of 10 in performance per jaw thickness. Carlyle tools are always priced higher than I assume, or that they should be, but also seem to perform quite good in my limited experience. The rest of the pack not doing too terribly, just that Urrea standing out for the wrong reasons. When looking at their hardness, and we'll display that for you here, but interesting to see how some of them are noticeably harder than others. But on to the points, the Pittsburgh gets a 3, so not so hot. The Husky 5, DeWALT 2.66, which is quite low. Kobalt 7, which is quite good. Urrea 1.33, the worst we've seen, unfortunately. Icon a mighty 9.33, then 8.33, 9.66, and a solid 9. Which means we got some new names at the top and bottom here of our overall standings. The popular peeking at your neighbor's notes sort of jaw design that all three of these use, making an impression at the top. Since these are all in a tie here, we're putting these two at the top because they seem for us to chew up a fastener less, with their noticeably less aggressive cuts and grooves. The right grip having an asterisk and a 10 here due to maxing out our setup. It never slipped. Still, our favorite overall is the right, but certainly not shabby the pricing down here from Icon and Milwaukee when on sale. The Icon was actually one of the cheapest wrenches of this whole bunch to buy individually by just calling Harbor Freight up. They shipped it for free, like $10 total. Pretty simple if you have the part number. Otherwise, the Kobalt, a mid-pack standout in my opinion, and Urrea as well, just for different reasons. Lots of weird, funky stuff going on with specialty jaw combination wrenches the more we looked into these. Some work, I guess, but on both SAE and metric, I don't know. One thing's for sure though, this one works until it takes something with it, and I'm guessing no real effective warranty. This one arguably did nothing or made it perform worse as far as specialty jaws go, and these, they throw everything at a jaw design that you can think of, and some of it stuck and works. But now you know of 3 sources you can find them in case you do fancy this sort of design. Appreciate you joining us on this one. Click subscribe to catch us on the next one, where we'll be buying more USA and lots of European names. Many of them I'm sure I'll butcher. Thanks for watching.